And we're back here at Pull Yourself to Pieces with our interview with Tim from High Times.
Thank you.
And where we left off, we were just coming back to New York after the
right. Tim
after a year in jail, yeah.
Right. Tim, what year was this at this point now?
76.
Okay.
Bicentennial year.
Oh, so you're like 21, right? 21 years old.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
I'm 18 at this point. Yep.
So I got out of jail. I decided I had already decided really not to smuggle anymore. The magazine was making money and self-supportive. And Tom didn't want to smuggle anymore. And in fact, at that point, Tom went into a pretty deep depression. He felt like my prison time was his fault, even though I reassured him many times I didn't hold him responsible for it. But
no, it was just bad luck. That's all.
Right. And all of us knew what could happen, when we go and do this. It's not like shocking.
Right.
So anyway, he got more and more depressed. He started into taking Quaaludes and stuff. It was not great. And then finally in, I want to say 78, he shot himself.
Oh, Tim, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. He was my best friend. Yeah. And it was pretty horrible. So, so I left the East Coast at that point and moved back to Oregon.
Left the magazine? You were still with the magazine at that point?
No, well, I stopped after the 5th year anniversary, so it was shortly after he died.
Oh, okay.
So did the magazine fold up, or did it just continue by other people running it?
It continued by other people running it.
Got it.
It's still going now, I think, but it's like quarterly. And I don't know who's right. I don't think any of the people who were around then are involved now.
Did you have an ownership share in it at that time, or it was just?
I did. There was about a dozen of us. When Tom died, there was about a dozen of us that he had left ownership to, and most of us said no thanks.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Things had changed. It was bad, and it was just it took me years to get over the pain of him committing suicide.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had an awful lot of great adventures with him. I could write a book just about the adventures with Tom.
You should.
Here's an example. Back in the olden days, they used to put cocaine in Coca-Cola, right?
Yes, we know. Yeah.
And they put it in wine. And it was considered. Oh, yeah. Cocaine wine. Yeah. Endorsed by popes, even. Yeah, you could look it up. It's pretty interesting. So Tom decided he really, really, really wanted a photograph of a bottle of this cocaine Coca-Cola. So we found, you go through these agencies, and we found somebody who had one. And we, paid a fee for it and had to take out insurance to make sure it didn't get broken or something. So we brought it to our office. Tom and I were there while the guy took a bunch of photographs of it and then left. And then Tom looked at me and I looked at him, and we both had the same idea. Like, dude, how many times in our life are we going to have a chance to actually taste cocaine Coca-Cola? We got insurance. What the hell's insurance for, right? So we opened the bottle and we drank it.
So what, like a 12-ounce bottle?
Yeah.
It was the old glass ones, right?
It was the old thing, the green glass ones, yeah.
Right.
So we drank it.
Wait, did it still have any fizz left?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Surprisingly.
Oh, my God. Wow. What are the odds?
It was sealed really well.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, we had our insurance guy call his insurance guy and say, "Oh, sorry, it got lost," or I can't even remember what we said.
Oops.
So, and he was furious. The guy was furious. But I think, as I recall, he got like 12 grand for it or something. I mean, he got a lot of money. So, go cry somewhere else.
Yeah.
So Tom and I had a lot of adventures like that.
So was there what kind of reaction when you remember that you had when you drank that? I mean, was it?
Our tongues were numb for sure.
Okay.
You could tell that it was different. The taste wasn't so different, but in your mouth it was kind of numb. And you definitely got a kind of energetic buzz out of it. It wasn't as clear or strong as snorting a line, but it was definitely there. There's no question about it.
Like a couple of Red Bulls. Couple of them.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
Huh. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. We had a lot of adventures.
Yeah.
So anyway, Tom died. I was sad. Went back to Oregon. I had this half-baked idea that I was going to try to reconnect with my father and stepmother, the Jehovah's Witness crazy people.
Right.
That did not work out at all. But I liked Oregon. I realized after 10 years in New York, I liked the pace. I liked the clean air. It seemed a better fit to me. So I stayed. I got a job at a local newspaper, kind of an alternative underground newspaper that was out weekly. They hired me to be their art director because I bullshitted my way into saying that I could do that. I mean, I worked at High Times. I was not the art director, but
right. Yeah, see,
good enough.
Back then, you could do that. You could bullshit. You could bullshit
your way into positions where you're telling other people that they're really the artists. You're just really just telling them, just making sure.
I'm the director.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the maestro.
Right.
And honestly, and in Oregon, in those days, oh, you're from New York?
Right.
What do you want? You can have everything. It was a big thing. So anyway, I had that job for a while. And, made some new friends, one of whom was really wonderful and assured me that I really, really needed to go to college. And
you in your mid-20s at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 1980.
Okay.
Yeah. She kind of made me fill out the paperwork. Paperwork is a thing for your listeners that don't understand. This stuff that they made from trees. There was no computers in those days.
No, you filled it out with a pen.
You can't even imagine that. Some young people, there was no computers.
Right,
no
I know. I've probably scared half your listeners.
We only have two. We only have two, so you only scared one.
I'm scared, so that's it.
Still scared.
So I applied to go to college here at the University of Oregon. Much to my shock, they said, "Okay, we'll take you." And I was a philosophy major. I enjoyed studying the history of religions. I enjoyed studying. Yeah, I enjoyed. I mean, I had this vague idea that I was an atheist, but I can't say that I was very knowledgeable about any religion other than the Jehovah's Witness version of the Bible, which isn't even the normal Christian version. Right. It's totally different. So anyway, I took all these religion classes. I took a lot of classes on Marx and Hegel. And I finally got to the part where I was in the doctoral program, like 6 years. Is that right? 5 years? 5 years. And I decided I really needed some time off from college. So I actually had a couple of friends, this Japanese couple, And they said, "Oh my God, Tim, you should go to Japan. Are you kidding me? You can teach English there for a year. Huh. You'll recharge your batteries, and it'll be great, right?" So, so I, like an idiot, I sold everything I owned. I had a yard sale. I sold everything except what would fit in 2 suitcases.
Wow! Again, fascinating.
I didn't even have a hotel reservation. I had a round trip ticket, because you have to buy a round trip.
And a passport at this point, right?
And a passport. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. First time I had traveled internationally with a passport.
Legitimately this time. Yeah. Yes. Without your gun. Yeah.
That's right. No gun. Yeah. They frown on that in Japan.
Yeah.
So I showed up, and at this time, this is 1989.
Wait, stop a second. I just picture you showing up to Japan kind of like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid do when they show up to Bolivia. So you just pull up to this town, and you get off the train, and there's nobody around. There's a goat, and you just stand there and go, "So here I am in Japan."
Right.
That's what I picture in my head.
Now? Yeah.
What am I supposed to do now?
It was like that. And so where am I going to go? I went to the fucking Holiday Inn in Tokyo, because it's an American hotel, right? So they didn't have any rooms. I didn't realize this, but I had arrived in Japan on a national holiday on a 3-day weekend.
What are the odds?
It was like the emperor's birthday or some shit like this. So all the rooms were booked.
Right.
And the smallest room they had was like $275 for a dinky little room with one bed in it.
Wow.
So the staff were very kind. They gave me suggestions. They helped me make phone calls. Everything was booked. So they had one cancellation. So I got to stay in their hotel for $275. I had $1,000 in my pocket. So now I'm going, okay, I've just spent a quarter of the money I have.
Right. Yeah. You better start conserving.
And all my friends back in Oregon had been like, "Dude, you're going to be back here in a week begging to sleep on my couch. I know you are." So I stayed in the Holiday Inn. Next day, I made some more phone calls and found a cheaper place that was $30 a night.
There you go.
There were there's a newspaper in Japan, still there, called Japan Times. It's all in English, and every Monday they have ads for jobs. And so I looked on there on Monday, and it was page after page after page of companies begging to hire anybody with who's a native English speaker. So in Japan, there are English conversation schools, is what they call them. And they're like franchises. They're like McDonald's. They're on every corner. People will pay all kinds of money to learn English or to have their kids learn English.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, this is amazing to me. It is.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. So, I mean, I didn't know how to teach English, right? When we say teach English, we're thinking of like our English teacher who taught us about prepositions and stuff, right?
Right, grammar, phonics, spelling.
I had no idea how to do that. Right. So it turns out that's not what they want.
I'm thinking of the movie Stripes in the very beginning, where the curly-haired guy is teaching the people how to speak English, and that's what I'm thinking.
More or less like that. That's right.
Okay.
So I got hired by one of these companies. They said, "Where would you like to teach?" Because they had 180 schools all over the country. And I said, "I want to teach in a small town," which made them very happy, because most Americans want to teach in Tokyo or Osaka, the big cities, so they can get laid, So they sent me to this little town up in the mountains, like about 4 hours northwest of Tokyo. I was literally the only foreigner in the whole town. Everybody in town knew where the foreigner's apartment was. Like, oh, that's it. That's where the foreigner lives right there. So
very popular. So you were very popular.
Very popular. Oh yeah, popular like a performing monkey walking down the street.
Oh, jeez.
And that, yeah, popular like that. So my first weekend in this little town, I'm just bopping around looking at things, and I come upon this store that says Moonchild in English, and I can tell from the outside it's like what we would call a junk shop. You know, it's like they got little weird stuff here and there, like used things.
Sure.
So I go in and I hear, "Good afternoon, welcome to Moonchild," in very perfect English. So it turns out the owner had lived in Seattle for a couple of years and spoke pretty good English.
Amazing.
He and I became friends. He and I liked the same kinds of music, you know, the Beatles and Dylan and stuff like that. He was about the same age as me. So he was like 4 or 5 blocks from my school where I worked. So I used to go and hang out with him on Saturdays, smoke cigarettes, and sit around and shoot the bull.
So he's a native Japanese man that was schooled in America, in Seattle, and now he's back and he's running this little shop. That's right. It's his shop. Okay. And he's got like, a Fonz lunchbox and like weird stuff. Like he had Goebbels' personal ring, like really weird stuff in his store. Oh my God. How do you acquire that?
Well, through auctions.
Oh, I guess so.
Yeah.
And then you have to hope that it's authentic and somebody's been pulling your chain.
Well, it's been all that stuff like Sotheby's and those kind of places. That's all authenticated.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the reason I'm telling you about this guy is because that's how I met the woman who later became my wife. One day after I had been in Japan for maybe 6 or 8 months, I showed up at his store. And I walk in and he goes, "You know what? You need to get married. Sit down and I'm going to call my niece." Yeah. Just like that.
He also has a matchmaking service on the side.
Well, yeah. Don't laugh because half the people in Japan do.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's a thing. That's a thing.
Right.
So he's like, "Sit down. I'm going to call my niece." Right. So he calls his niece. She shows up 10 or 15 minutes later, doesn't speak a word of English.
Oh.
And my Japanese was really, really limited at that time.
Sure.
I wasn't really motivated to learn much Japanese, to be honest, because everybody around me spoke English.
Oh, sure. Right.
Anyway, so he said, "You guys go out for coffee tonight." So she picked me up after work. We went for coffee. And I had like my dictionaries and she had her dictionaries. And, takes 5 minutes to make a sentence like what kind of music you like.
Yeah. Right.
It was awkward. It was weird. But, but I liked her. She liked me. We went on a few dates. And I had a coworker at my school who was really good at teaching me like some catchphrases, some sentences that you might use on a date.
Good. Yeah.
So he helped me out with that. We went on dates, one thing led to another and we got married. So
a traditional Japanese wedding with all the fanfare. So what's that like? How does that differ from, how Americans get married?
It's pretty interesting, actually. To be honest, a lot of people in Japan get married at what they call a wedding palace. What it is like they have a fake preacher. They hire foreigners and give them a preacher's outfit, literally. And then the couple wears like a tuxedo and a white wedding dress because this is the point. She really, really, really wants to wear the white wedding dress. It's the thing. Japanese women really want that.
Wow.
So then that's how they do their ceremony. I'd say maybe a third of Japanese couples get married that way.
So they've patterned their ceremony after a traditional American ceremony. Then.
Right. Exactly.
That's fascinating. I would think it would be just the opposite, that they would want nothing to do with Western culture, and they would just adhere to whatever they've done for centuries. But they hire somebody to act as a preacher, and you're in a tux, and she's in a white dress, and everybody's happy.
Right.
Amazing.
And it's interesting you mentioned about being susceptible to Western culture. They like the image of things, but they don't want the content of things. So there have been Christian missionaries literally since the day the war ended, all over Japan, trying really, really hard, and they have not been able to get Christianity off the ground in Japan. Less than 3% of the whole country
that's a good thing. I think they were giving up by now.
That's a very good thing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, they never give up. Yeah, it's a very good thing. There's Mormons everywhere in Japan. You can recognize them, there's a few Catholic churches here and there, but so like I say, about 1/3 does this fake tuxedo and dress ceremony. The rest, the other 2/3, do the traditional way, which is what I did. You go to a Shinto temple, and my wife wore a special kind of wedding kimono, and I wore something called a hakama, which is, I don't know, it's not really a tuxedo. It's not an equivalent to a tuxedo. It's a little bit fancy. It's a little bit getting dressed up.
Kind of like a bedazzled sport jacket?
Well, it's pants too. It's baggy pants that look
Tim.
like.
I hope you had pants on.
Well, the jacket could have been long,
Yeah. Okay.
So and that was interesting too. We had to be you have to hire a dresser. Here's a little known fact. No Japanese woman can put on a kimono by herself. It is physically impossible. First, really? Especially a dressy one, like a wedding one or a funeral one.
You need 4 arms.
Yes. Well, there's several layers to it. And you have to get tied up. It's a little bit like putting on a corset was a long time ago.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
So we had to be at the dressers at 6 a.m. on the day of our wedding. It took them 30 minutes to put me in my hakama.
Oh, jeez.
It took them 3 hours to put my wife in her wedding kimono.
Which means it's going to take you 3 hours to get out of that kimono. So you better get started with the you better get started early in the evening.
We're going to get to that. There's some very weird stuff around that. So we go to the we had our wedding photo taken after that, which I've posted on Twitter before. I'll show you what it looks like later. So then we go to the shrine and we do the ceremony. Nobody told me what the ceremony was about. And so they don't have vows, right? But they do have this thing where they pour you a cup of sake and you're supposed to drink it in 3 sips, right? Not down it 3 times, but 3 sips, right?
3 sips. Okay.
Right. And I thought you're supposed to down it 3 times. So I knock it back and hold it out. And then the guy's got to pour me another one.
Right.
Right. And I knock it back. And my wife, my soon-to-be wife, is not impressed with this.
No, not at all.
Anyway, so we got married. And then it's time to go back to the dresser. And
get pulled out of that stuff.
Well, I got to wear mine. She gets out of her wedding kimono, her white one, and then there's another one that she puts on. That's I'm trying to remember, light blue maybe. So then we show up at the wedding party place, which was my wife's father was a fish wholesaler. I did not meet him. He passed away a few years before I met her, but he, needless to say, had plenty of friends in the sushi world. So our wedding party was at this guy's sushi restaurant.
Oh my God. I bet it was incredible, wasn't it?
It was incredible.
Oh,
The biggest room he had would only fit 60 people. So that was how many we could have.
wow.
And he, so the problem was my wife's kimono was so tight, she couldn't eat anything. Like it was literally that tight. And she couldn't drink. She was sipping through a straw a little orange juice, and that's all she could have. Me, I'm sitting over here eating the very best sushi that you can even imagine and knocking back liters of cold Japanese beer.
Oh boy.
Yeah. They have this thing in Japan. If you're at a party, especially a wedding party, people will come up to you and they want to refill your beer, right? So they'll pour beer and fill up your bottle, and then they'll stand there and they want to see you drink it. And then there's a guy behind him and he wants to fill up your beer too. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
There's a whole line.
It's the Japanese version of beer pong.
Yeah. It took me years in Japan to find out how to make that stop, because saying, no, I've had enough does not work ever.
I see. Yeah.
Here's the secret in case you're ever in that situation.
You started carrying your gun again.
You let them fill it to the top, and then you don't drink it.
Oh.
You say, thank you very much, and you don't drink it. And then they can't do anything. They can't put any more in there. Because if you take a sip, they're going to put a sip in there.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, we had our wedding party. That was very nice. And 2 days after our wedding, I was transferred to Nagoya, which was very far south, very far away from my wife's hometown. I got promoted to be the manager of all the foreign teachers, which is 350 people or so.
Really? Wow, that's a pretty decent position.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Although my boss was a real asshole, but
sorry to hear that.
That happens.
Yeah. Sure.
But like my job was like this. We'd get a call in the head office. So-and-so, the foreign teacher, Mikey, he doesn't want to wear his tie today because it's too hot. So then my boss says, Tim, go out there and tell Mikey he's got to wear his tie. So it's a 4-hour train ride. It's a 4-hour train ride. I take the train out there. I go up. I sit down in a room with Mikey. I'm like, Mikey, you got to wear your tie. It's in your contract. He's like, oh, okay, sorry. And that's the end of it. Then I got to go 4 hours back there. Yeah. Seriously.
Wow. It's the whole day.
That was what I did a lot of the time.
Wow.
But they were happy,
Yeah, sure.
So my wife was not happy. If there's any bigotry in Japan, it is in accents. And my ears were not that finely tuned, but the accent of people in Nagoya is very, 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 very different than the accent of people up in Gunma in Tokyo, that area. So my wife hated being there. She hated everything about it. So after a year, we went back. I went back to teaching English, and my wife was pregnant with our first child.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So my plan was to spend a year in Japan and then come back and finish my doctoral work. So now I wasn't going back in a year.
No, you weren't. No, you weren't.
So I stayed there for quite a few years. Altogether, I was there for like 14 years.
Wow.
And
that's a long time.
I eventually worked for this English conversation school for 6 years, I think, about 6 years. And then I opened my own school.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic.
So my wife was the manager and I was the teacher. And it was very successful. We used to make like $6,000 or $7,000 a month, which would be a lot of money here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Japan, it ain't shit.
Oh, really?
Wow. That's amazing.
In Japan, a cantaloupe is $30.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah. All right. I see it. Yeah.
A watermelon is like $100.
Oh my
Whoa,
god.
Okay, everything is expensive there.
Except rice.
So, no, see, I thought that too. Rice is really expensive. The first time I went to a rice shop, before I met my wife or I was just by myself, I went to buy like a 5-kilo bag of rice, and it was $50.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just plain rice. There was nothing special about it.
Wow.
Yeah, I would have thought like supply and demand kind of thing, but the Japanese government does price supports for Japanese farmers. They don't allow any rice to be imported into Japan, so there's only Japanese rice.
Oh.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, nothing is cheap there. Nothing is cheap except having a baby. They actually pay you to have children. I'm not kidding.
That's funny. Isn't China just the opposite, where they don't want you having any kids, but Japan says, "Hey, come and procreate. Come to Japan and procreate."
China has changed that policy now. They're allowing 2 kids per couple.
Wow.
But in Japan, because the percentage of old people is so high and the birth rate is so low, they're paying people. I think we got $3,000 for our daughter and $5,000 for our son, because it went up after a while.
That's
wow.
amazing.
Yeah, it's so weird. But other than that, everything is expensive in Japan. So anyway, then move back to Oregon.
Yeah. What led up to that? You just.
Well, it was really my wife that wanted to. And I mean, me a little bit too. If you have a biracial family in Japan, you have some troubles.
Oh.
They are not racist, but they do look down on everybody else in the world.
Okay.
My kids got bullied really badly, like constantly. And I would go down and have a conversation with the principal, and their reaction was always like, what? They're half American. What do you expect? Of course they're going to get bullied. Right. I mean, I was literally, they made zero. Yeah. Duh. They made zero effort to try to get across the concept to their students that bullying was a less than desirable thing.
I bet that hasn't changed till today.
No, I'm sure it hasn't.
So it makes sense that your wife would want to come here, and where at least the playing field is leveled.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, but didn't you experience just the opposite of Americans looking at your children and going, "Hey, those kids are half Japanese"?
No, not really. Actually, it was the opposite. They were like, "Hey, those kids are half Japanese. How cool is that?"
Well, that's saying something for our country. Yay, it's about time something good. Yeah.
But also, in my hometown here in Oregon, there is a Japanese immersion school that's run by, the school board. It's not a private school or anything. You have to audition, to get into it. So most of the kids that go there are kids like in my family situation where like the mom or the dad is Japanese and, something like that. So luckily my kids got to, go for that kind of environment.
So like what ages were they when you moved back?
My son was junior high, first year of junior high. Yeah. And I guess my daughter would be first year of high school. And they both skipped the class as soon as we got here. So I had to pay this really expensive translation company to get their school records translated into English. And finally, when I got them, the school board here was like, oh, well, they're in the wrong class. And they bumped them both up for some reason.
Wow.
Anyway, it was weird.
Because the Japanese were that far advanced over us. So yeah.
Yeah,
well, that's
probably.
Good. that makes sense. Yeah.
So then after that, I became a social worker. I got a job managing. See, the word management is in your resume, and then people want to hire you to be a manager.
Sure. Yeah.
I was managing group homes for disabled adults from this company that had them all over the country. I managed 7 of them here in this town, meaning I had to manage a whole bunch of staff because they were staffed 24/7. Some of the residents were like medically fragile, so we had nurses that we had to hire. It was not fun. It was very, very, very stressful. And some of the residents were violent and would tear the place apart.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Where was this now? Like in the 90s, I would say?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, wait. No, it was later. It was 2000. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So 2000, and we're talking Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so have you discovered now by this point that you're an avowed atheist?
Yeah, absolutely. As a result of my philosophy classes. Oh, also, I forgot to leave. When I was still in Japan, I finished my doctorate degree with another university in Hawaii that allowed me to do it via, I won't say internet.
Okay. Carrier pigeon?
Carrier pigeon, yeah. Right. Hula girls that came and picked up my papers. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So I am Dr. Tim now.
You are Dr. Tim.
Okay.
I am Dr. Tim. So yeah.
And we should address him that way, Ray.
I'm sorry. So yes, Dr. Tim.
After studying Hegelian philosophy, especially, and the history of religions, it really sparked an interest for me. And so in my spare time, I started reading a lot about religions and mythologies, different countries. And of course, I studied a lot about the Abrahamic religions.
And you noticed some patterns, didn't you?
Oh, my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so many of them are just lies.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite...
Look, they're all man-made. Let's be honest. They're all man-made, right. But they're all very, very similar.
Right. That's right. They really are. They're similar in that most of them were designed to control women, for one thing.
Yeah.
A lot of them, if not all, are, having women as second-class citizens. Right. But also the magic stories that they tell are kind of similar from religion to religion.
Right.
So which makes me think, there's a lot of Bible stories that you can read in earlier traditions, long before the Bible was written. And then you go, oh, well, that's where they got that from.
Oh, my gosh. So plagiarism in the early stages. Yeah.
That's right. Not to mention the fact that
reboots and remakes, right?
There's they get rebooted and retranslated, and it doesn't bear any resemblance to its original form.
Got it.
But you're right. The fundamental point is there aren't any gods. All these gods are myths. They're just myths. Take for example Shintoism in Japan, the place where I got married. It's seen as a cultural mythology now. Not one person in Japan believes that their creation story, for example, is real, that it actually happened. Not one person.
See, that's amazing to me, because you would think that it would be just the opposite. Like Japan, it is. Look, they are definitely way ahead of us in intelligence, because Christianity just keeps getting procreated down the line. It keeps passed along, and people still believe it. But yet they've gone the opposite way, and they refuse to believe it. That's very enlightening.
Yeah, it is. It really is. They accept it as part of their cultural heritage, and that's why these Shinto temples are all over Japan. And the one I got married in was like 1,700 years old. It's
Wow.
pretty cool. They're cool little places, but nobody walks around. There's no Shinto Bible, for example.
Gotcha.
There's same thing with Buddhism. There's no tradition where you show up every Sunday. You know what I mean? There's no food you're supposed to eat, or Japanese people. Most of them are really atheists if you ask them.
Okay,
but like in Japan, when you get married, it's Shinto, and when you die, funerals are always at a Buddhist temple.
Wow.
And yeah, whether you believe it or not.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah, and nobody in Japan buys the Christian nonsense.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, they just don't.
It's a hard sell. I mean, the story makes no sense.
Right. That's right.
It's a real hard sell. It really is.
But I'll tell you one bad thing about when all these missionaries descended on Japan, Christian missionaries. They did not succeed in converting many people, but they did succeed in changing Japanese people's way of thinking about certain things. For one thing, homosexuality. Of course, there are lesbian and gay people in Japan, but they are in the shadows. There is no open liberation movement. There is no gay marriage, nothing like that. Wow. Even gay bars are limited to you have to know somebody who knows somebody to find out where it's at. So that came directly from the missionaries. Another sad thing is they have these hot springs all over Japan. Wonderful, wonderful places. Like hot volcanic water comes up from the ground. And
it's really that hot?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them, they have to add cold water. It's so hot. Wow. But it's like the hottest bath you've ever had, but nice. Not it doesn't make you want to get out. And it makes you want to relax. It's just wonderful. And it's got minerals. A lot of them have a lot of minerals in it because it comes up from volcanic tunnels underground. Before the war, everybody went in together. After the war, when the GIs and the missionaries told Japanese people that they should be ashamed of their naked bodies.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah. All of the hot springs now are separated, men and women. So families can't do it together. And if you got kids, you got to decide, who's going with who. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the missionaries did have some negative impact on the country. But not the church. So, so there was nobody for me to really have atheist conversations with in Japan. One of my students was a Buddhist priest who wanted to study English. And what he wanted to do was study Buddhist English. So that was quite a challenge for me. And I really enjoyed it because, of course, a lot of religions have their own vocabulary that means certain things. And I knew some of it, but not all of it. So I had to really prepare. But he paid me $100 an hour to teach him. So
how could you say no? Good. He made you an offer you couldn't refuse.
That's right. So now I was really stressed out from that management job. So I retired. So now I am retired.
And
this is fairly
retired.
recent.
3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk or not talk about anxiety, because that's something my brother knows about.
Oh, too
Um,
well.
Yeah, all too well. And I thought you two guys would have something to talk about.
Oh, we don't want to talk about it.
Yes, you do, because
Not
talking
really.
talking about it helps you face it.
bull.
And you don't think so?
Well, yeah, I'm not so sure that works. I mean,
really,
talking about it. I mean, I don't mind, because I want your two listeners to maybe learn something about it.
Well, I'm always interested, because, have
you never had any anxiety? You must have had it, right?
The first time I had a panic attack, I sat there and thinking, "Oh crap, this is what Bill goes through," and it was not fun at all. It was not fun at all. Mine was getting like an ear infection, and I couldn't hear out my ear anymore.
Right.
And it freaked me out real bad, and I got my first panic attack, and it was horrible.
So you permanently can't hear out of your ear, or just during the infection?
It cleared up. But
no, because I know somebody that lost their hearing in one ear from that.
Yeah.
It does happen.
I know.
I'm glad it didn't happen. Yeah.
I was lucky. And then
I have hearing loss. I'm supposed to be wearing hearing aids. I have vision. I have compromised vision. This doesn't, these things kind of add to the anxiety.
I'm wearing hearing aids now, believe it or not. I just got them not too long ago, and they're pretty wonderful.
Yeah, I'll have to get a little more convinced. I'll probably have to do it myself, but
they're expensive.
Right. That's what's holding me up right now. But
I got somehow they convinced. I'm on Medicare and Medicaid, so somehow they convinced them to pay for them. I don't know how, but
that's great.
That's good news. Yeah.
So my first panic attack. I mean, I've obviously throughout my life I've dealt with high stress situations.
Sure.
To say the least.
And getting arrested, all that stuff. Yeah. But I never thought of myself. I was on hyper vigilant alert, but I never thought of myself as especially full of anxiety or stress. But let's see, about 5 years ago, I was at work. I was driving in my car down the street, nothing especially happening. And out of nowhere, somebody flipped a switch, and my body acted like, somebody had just been murdered right in front of me or something. I had to pull over. I couldn't drive. I just had a complete panic attack. It went on for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Out of nowhere, with no catalyst.
Out of nowhere. None that I could find. I mean, nobody cut me off in traffic or something.
Right.
And then it went away. And, I come home. I told my wife about it. She's like, "Oh, wow, that's weird." And
typical reaction.
Right. What else can you say?
Yeah. Well, I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the first one. So she didn't know how serious they were going to be. So then they started happening from time to time. And of course you get stuck.
All on their own.
Yeah.
No real.
That's what happens with me most
trigger.
times, Ray. A lot of times they're just out of nowhere.
Really?
No trigger.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're out of nowhere.
See,
no trigger at all.
See, mine were triggered. Mine were triggered. So I can at least.
Yours was a reaction to all of a sudden not being able to hear, or that kind of thing. So yours is just like oh my God, am I dying kind of thing.
Right, you're panicking.
And you spiral down.
Right, panicking that I can't hear out of one ear, and I shouldn't have panicked, but I did, and again, it was not a good feeling. So
you panicked for something that you weren't used to. It was like an unknown. The unknown.
Yes. Okay. But
you were afraid.
So for you guys, it just pops up out of the blue.
Pretty much.
So and here's the thing. I used to spend an awful lot of time going down this rabbit hole of why. Like, why did I get a panic attack just then? Trying to figure out the reason. It's ridiculous. It is a no-win situation.
You can't figure it out. You
can't figure it out.
I think you're right.
It just is what it is. You got to let it go, and it's a waste of time and energy to try to figure it out. unless it's something obvious, but there never is. So now I haven't had a lot of panic attacks lately. Instead, I feel like pretty much 24 hours a day, low level panic. Like my gut is in a knot,
Oh, right.
And and that tight feeling in my chest.
Right.
It's not, my body is acting like there's something to panic about. And there isn't. They're really.
Could you possibly think that the current state of affairs of the world that we're living in right now could be an underlying factor that you've got that on your mind? Because shit, I know I do, and I know Billy does too.
Sure.
So
it doesn't help.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't help.
Like I can't read the story about the Uvalde. I don't know how do you pronounce that word.
Yeah.
The kids. I can't. I absolutely cannot read it or see pictures of it. I went into Twitter. I found this great little way of muting words. Like you can go in and tell Twitter, I don't ever want to hear the word NBA.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I saw that.
Man,
I got a list a mile long.
So that helped. So that must have helped.
It helps a lot. But you're right. Good. There are some things, just ongoing stuff in the world that that are contributing probably. My biggest fear is not so much the kids that get shot, which is breathtakingly awful. It's a civil war. My biggest fear is these Christian fascists really, really want to have a civil war. And January 6th was just a inept, amateurish attempt. But, Hitler did that too. Hitler didn't take over on his first coup d'etat attempt. These guys could turn around and do it again, only this time having learned their lessons. That's what really worries me on an ongoing basis.
It's a legitimate concern.
Yeah. Well, I'm not too worried about a civil war, but I am worried about Republicans being in too much power, and they're exercising their power lately, trying to take us back hundreds of years. And it's it's definitely it's on my mind a lot. Personal freedoms are being taken away from certain groups, and it's not good. And sometimes, like I told Billy, I said I've unplugged. I don't read the news anymore. It's been months now since I've read the news because it was making me angry and depressed. And I thought, what, I just don't want to know. I just don't want to know anymore. And if burying my head in the sand makes me feel better, so be it. It's the way it is.
I canceled my newspaper. I canceled my cable. I get as much news as I can handle from Twitter.
Same here. And
good enough,
And even that's too much. For me, that's too much now. So, yeah.
And I think an awful lot of people on Twitter don't really understand the depth of the problem here. You can't just say, hey, everybody, retweet this 100 times. Let's vote blue.
Yeah.
That is not how it works.
No,
you're not an activist.
No, you're not an activist. No. Nope. Well, Tim, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, gosh, I could probably talk another 4 or 5 hours, but
I bet you could.
I think that's enough.
Is there one great story you'd like to share with us? A really great story, like, oh my God, that's one for the books.
Gosh. One time in Miami, I was in a house where a big high-level meeting was taking place. There was maybe 8 or 10 big-time dealers, like dealers that were bringing in tons. And Tom and I and we wanted to, talk with them and negotiate some things with them. And I leaned over and pulled the curtain back and said, "Does anybody know somebody with 14 white Dodges?" And yeah, they didn't think it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. People panicked. The toilets started flushing. People were running out the back door, and I'm like, no. I'm kidding. Yeah. So that did not. And Tom was furious with me because that was not what we were there to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a comedian. Sometimes I'm a comedian.
I get it.
Ray can relate to that.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
You've put your foot in your mouth but didn't care.
All the time. So sometimes, Tim, you have no filter, because I can relate to that. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Same here. Yep.
So why do you live in Virginia? Because I can tell you're a New Yorker.
Oh, of course. I grew up on Long Island.
Long Island, yeah.
No, nobody says that. I keep,
they do say that here.
No, they don't.
Oh, they do.
I never said it.
Well, okay, that's you.
When I lived in New York, people said it.
Yeah.
Well, then it must have been the rich Jewish people that talked like that, because
could be.
I never spoke that way. Let's see. I was partners in a furniture manufacturing company, very high end, very, very ultra modern stuff. And we had a big shop and 15 employees. And this is in the early 90s. And at some point,
on Long Island?
On Long Island, yep.
Okay.
Very expensive stuff, all ultra modern. And
nice.
I was running the back and the front. And I was putting in 80 hours a week. And
sure.
I was a mess. I had a facial tic. I was short-tempered. If you had met me back then, you would have said, "What an asshole."
That's all still today, right?
Oh,
I hear you.
I knew I just had to get out of there. I had to flee New York, because it was going to give me either a stroke or a heart attack or both. So packed up the wife and said, "We're out of here." And
you moved to Beverly.
And her uncle, my ex-wife's uncle, used to have a family reunion just north of Charlottesville. So we used to come down here to vacation every summer, and we thought this place was gorgeous. I mean, it was very, very nice. It was completely different than what we had grown up with on Long Island. And when it came time to move, we picked this. It was halfway between Florida, where my parents had retired to, and her parents were still on Long Island. So we picked Virginia. And
30 years later, you're still there.
30 years later, I'm still here. And in parts of this place, they're still fighting the Civil War. There's a lot of rednecks still living here. This place has its pluses and its minuses, I guess, like any place.
Sure.
So that's why I'm here. But do I call this place home? No, it's just where I currently live. So
Ray, I've lived in New York, Long Island my whole life. I still don't call this place home.
Okay. So yeah.
Well, I hear you. So your description of yourself working 80 hours and having a facial tic, that's how I was when I was managing these group homes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I was on call 24/7. I was on call 24/7. Get the phone call 5 minutes to 11 at night. I can't come in to work my overnight shift. Yeah. So guess who's going to work it? Me.
Yeah. So it's like you were an RN nurse. Yeah, on call.
Yeah, exactly. So I completely understand that feeling, and I'm glad that I'm away from it now.
Well, this has been a fascinating show, and
absolutely.
Tim, thank you for joining us.
Oh yes,
thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
I was speechless.
Billy, I told you. I told you.
Fascinating.
All right.
I have a really boring life.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I thought mine was interesting.
I got to really pull from the. I don't know what I can pull to put if I ever got to, ask you what was your life like. All right.
Not like Tim's. Not like Tim's. That's for sure.
Boring.
Boring. Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
All right.
But a long, boring life is sometimes better than a short, exciting one.
Good point.
I can.
Good point.
I can see that. Absolutely.
And that's a good way to end this.
That's a good way to end this. Yeah. On that note,
Tim, I hope that in the future that Ray can convince you to maybe come back in the future, maybe, and we'll talk again, because I'm sure there's other things.
Oh yeah,
in there,
I think we can convince him to come back on and tell us all the in between stuff that we missed.
Well, we'll just talk for an hour about anxiety, and we'll make everybody listening. We'll make everybody listening have panic attacks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Can do.
All righty. Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks. Well, thank you again. Yeah. And to our 3 or 4 listeners, thanks you for tuning in. Yeah. And we promise to have our next show is going to be good. We have a Celebrity Kitchen. We have a nice guest coming in for Celebrity Kitchen.
Okay.
And yeah, so tune in.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Signing off for now. Bye-bye.
This is Bill, and you're listening to Pull Yourself to Pieces, the podcast, hosted on Anchor. You never heard of Anchor? Anchor by Spotify is a podcast host platform, and it's an easy way to make a podcast. We picked Anchor because they have everything we needed all in one place. You can record and edit a podcast from your computer or even right from your phone. Then you can have your podcast distributed easily to multiple platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and much more. And did I mention it's free? That's right. Anchor is free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Please check out our website, pullyourselftopieces.com.
That's right.
And you can subscribe to the show in Google and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Castbox, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Stitcher, and YouTube, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode.
And if you enjoy our show, don't forget to give us a high rating.
And remember to tell your friends about the show.
Thanks for listening to our show, and thank you to freesounds.org and Gottlieb, Audio Mirage, Plasterbrain, Cognito Perceptu, FK Prod, Mirage Chaser, Shadow Wisp, DBoss, Viku Seru, Intra Environmental Sound Project, Julian Nicholas, Carmelo Mike, G Kill Hour, 140178 Sound, CMU Sound Design, Alan Mchi, Der Super Anton, Eric H2000, Bulbastray, FK Phantom, Ultra Dust, Ada Records, Stuart Colborn, Debroid, Cubidup, GJ, Syntax Seed, Inspector J, Astounded, Madge 061785, Just Invoke, Short Record, Lorenzo Sue, and I'm Mackenzie. CreativeCommons.org/licenses/by/3.0/legal code.